Hello, this is Archie Dunlop with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, June the 27th, 2023. Today I want to talk about Hunter Biden and his father, Joe. Reason being because I keep seeing these references to Hunter Biden's laptop. I've seen them for the last few years, and to be honest, I don't know what they are. I don't know what's going on. So, as far as Hunter Biden is concerned, I'm just going to summarize what I've discovered. So, Hunter Biden obviously gets a lot of flack. Maybe because it's people on the right are trying to undermine his father via him. But there seems to be no doubt that Hunter Biden has attracted through his own actions some bad publicity. I mean, for example, he was discharged from the Navy Reserve for failing a drugs test. He was also, I think, charged for illegally owning a gun while he was a drug user. And I think that's because he had signed something saying he didn't take drugs, but actually he was a drug user at the time. So drugs are a theme in his life, or at least have been a theme in his life. We've also got his business activities. He's been on the board of a Chinese investment company. He's been on the board of a Ukrainian energy company. He has had his tax affairs investigated. So with Hunter Biden, there's plenty to criticize. Now, as far as the laptop is concerned, he had a laptop, and there were loads of emails on the laptop. And some of his emails are interesting. Something like that. I mean, I don't really know. I don't really care. But it's what people are interested in, or at least some people are interested in. So what I want to do is look at Hunter Biden's chart to see if we can get any information from it. And, matters are not helped by the fact that we don't have a time of birth for Hunter Biden, which I kind of find really surprising. We've got a birth time for his father, so you would have thought from an evolutionary perspective, the son would at least have the same level of accuracy as his father, who was born in 1942. But no, we do not have a birth time for Hunter Biden, which makes it really difficult to say anything useful about his horoscope. So let's look at Hunter Biden's chart. So, as far as I can see, there is no absolute indication in his chart about his colourful life, the drug use, maybe the firearms, but it's not written in lights, not written in flashing neon lights. And of course, we don't have a time of birth. So this is his chart. It's set for February the 4th, 1970, at noon, because we don't have a birth time, in Wilmington, Delaware. The most interesting thing about this chart is the fact that he has got Mars opposition Uranus. Mars 7:58 Aries at noon. Opposition Uranus at 8:34 Libra. Now, lots of people have Mars opposition Uranus. So, in a sense, it's not a big deal. But given the firearm issue, maybe the Mars Uranus is telling us something. The Mars Uranus opposition, it's a bit hasty. Mars in Aries likes to take action, and perhaps as a result of this action with that Uranus, there can be unfortunate events. But maybe we need to see this Mars-Uranus opposition in a different light. It's the fact that on December the 18th, 1972, when he was 2 years and 10 months, I think, 9 months. So fairly shortly before his third birthday, his mother was driving him and his brother and sister, and she had a terrible accident. And here is the chart for the accident on December the 18th, 1972. I think it was near Hocks in Delaware, and I found a source for that it was around 2:30 p.m. That would kind of make sense because we've got Mars on the seventh house cusp, and as a result of his accident, his mother was killed and his sister was killed. So this is an absolutely devastating event, and obviously, so going back to Hunter Biden's chart. The Mars-Uranus opposition perhaps makes sense. Here is someone who had a Mars-Uranus opposition in his chart when he was born, but as a result of this accident, which is really a very Mars-Uranus event, it kind of got sealed in. It really became part of who he was. Now, I don't see a very strong Neptune here because when you think about drugs, you think about Neptune. When you think about all of these allegations against him, which are there to try and hurt his father, I would have thought, Neptune is not really there. So if you wanted to look at his chart to help discredit him, to build up this narrative about what a dreadful person he is or anything like that, I don't think it works. It's not a chart that really speaks a great deal to me. But the Mars-Uranus is important. There are some other things going on in his chart which may link to the accident. So if you look at his sun, he's got a Sun-Venus conjunction. Now, a Sun-Venus conjunction tends not to be fortunate. Reason being is that Venus is the planet of relationships. It's also the planet of women. So in a man's chart, if they've got Sun conjunct Venus, this might say something about how he relates to women, and it might suggest that he might not always treat women very well. Now, as far as his personal life is concerned, he had a marriage. I think he had 3 children. He got divorced. He had a relationship with a woman called London Roberts, and as a result, there was a child from it, a daughter. But I think he denied paternity, and it had to be established via DNA. Now, that's not a very nice thing to do. I mean, if you've had a child with a woman, you should at least admit it, at least accept paternity, or I don't know, I suppose, or at least be open-minded until you get the DNA test. Maybe that's some indication of the Sun-Venus conjunction. And also, Venus is a universal significator of women. So if we look at the Sun-Venus conjunction, we can see that the Sun is at 1528 Aquarius, and Venus is at 18.5 Aquarius. So the Sun and Venus are about 2.5 degrees apart, when he was born, if we assume a midday birth time. So using a symbolic measure, and last time I talked about a symbolic measure, there's this thing in astrology called solar arc directions. So solar arc directions, the principle is that every degree a planet moves is equal to a year. And with a solar arc direction, you move every single planet by 1 degree every year. And so if you move a planet by 5 degrees, that corresponds to 5 years. So in this case, with his Sun and Venus, the Sun will get to the degree of Venus in 2.5 degrees, which would be 2.5 years. So if we count 2.5 years from February 1970, we get to, I think we get to August 1972, symbolically, 2.5 degrees, 2.5 years from a birthday when he was 2.5 years old. So that would be August 1972. Now, he had the big accident was in December 1972. So you might think, well, that's not 2.5 years. That's more like 2 years and 10 months. But, astrology is not that exact, and we must always allow a bit of leeway. And so I'm hypothesizing that 2.5 degrees between the Sun and Venus actually represents this accident which killed 2 women, his mother and his sister. So there is a Sun-Venus conjunction, and I think that does to me make a bit of sense. Also, he's got another opposition in his chart between Jupiter and Saturn, and you will see that he's got Jupiter at 5 degrees 37 Scorpio, Saturn at 259 Taurus. So that means 5. Yeah, his Jupiter and Saturn are 2.5 degrees apart. So if one was trying to make a forecast for this child, one might really think that something might be happening 2.5 when he was around 2.5. So I think one might have got the event out. You might have thought it was going to be in August, although we don't know his precise time of birth, and this could make a difference to when we would forecast it. But I looked at the overall links between the planets when the accident happened and his chart. It wasn't great. I mean, I didn't find anything absolutely dead on. I mean, looking at the lunar return for Hunter Biden, December the 8th, 1972. This was when the moon roughly returned to when he was born. It's rough because we don't know his exact time of birth, so we don't know where the moon is exactly. But you will see that on his lunar return there is an exact Sun-Saturn opposition. So that might have some bearing on it. But maybe we can look at it from his father's perspective. Now here is Joe Biden's horoscope. Now this horoscope, to my mind, is why he should not be president. I think it's really dangerous having Joe Biden as president. I think he puts the country in danger. For the very simple fact that he has got Uranus on the 7th house cusp. Now, the 7th house is the planet of relationships. Uranus is the planet of accidents and maybe revolution. Now, another person who had Uranus on the seventh house cusp was Louis XVI of France. So, as we know, Louis XVI, he was the king during the French Revolution, and he got beheaded by the guillotine. One astrological writer in the 19th century, I think, or early 20th, described Uranus on the seventh house as death by the mob. Now, I'm not saying that for Joe Biden, but with this Uranus on the seventh house cusp that Louis XVI had, when he got married, he married, Marie Antoinette. Now, at the time of the marriage, Uranus wasn't discovered. But if Marie Antoinette had known about Uranus, she might not have wanted to marry Louis XVI, because she also died by the guillotine. So she is like accident prone, and it's not her accident, it's her husband's accident. So someone with Uranus on the seventh in an extreme situation, this could be a signifier of a wife who dies by accident, or perhaps a wife who dies in a revolution under mob rule or whatever. And so Joe Biden's first wife died in an accident. And that's Uranus on the seventh. So, steer clear of someone with a Uranus on the seventh, Uranus in the seventh house cusp. And this man, Joe Biden, he's now the American president. He's in control. So, as president, he's attracting for America violent events. I suppose the most extreme thing that can happen is that through his actions in Ukraine, he could lead America into a nuclear war. But I'm kind of going a bit far on that. So there is Joe Biden's chart. As far as why Joe Biden lost his wife when he lost his wife, I don't know about the precise event. We can look at the bi-wheel, for example. This is Joe Biden's chart in the middle. These are the planets for when the accident happened. And you will notice that the moon on December the 18th, 1972 was at 4 degrees 28 Gemini. So that was right on his descendant, because he had his descendant at 311 Gemini. So we have got moon right there, and we don't even know when precisely Joe Biden was born. You can see that technically it's 8:30 a.m., but that's a rather round time. So when you're doing a chart and you see 8:30 a.m., consider the possibility that it's perhaps 8:35, 8:25. There could be up to a quarter of an hour error in that birth time, and so the moon could well have been exactly on his descendant. So if we look at the accident and we look at the midpoints for this, and we make this a bit bigger, we can see at the time of the accident, the moon was square the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So assuming we have got the time of the accident right, the moon is a universal significator of women and perhaps wives, and it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint, so that would be, or could be, construed as death of the wife. And that moon on the Mars-Saturn midpoint was right on his descendant. So I think that might be some explanation for it. Now, I want to make one other point about Joe Biden. I don't want to spend long on this point, but I think it's actually quite a serious point. This is not about the past. It's not about Hunter Biden. It's about his solar return for 2023. I really have to say this because I think it's important. Remember we were talking about Mars-Uranus in Hunter Biden's chart. Well, Joe Biden's solar return, this is the moment the sun returns to where it was when he was born. So Joe Biden has his solar return on November the 19th, 2023 at just after 11 p.m. And here is the midheaven, 16 Taurus. And quite close to the midheaven is Uranus. Uranus is on the midheaven. I mean, if you're interested, when the Hiroshima bomb went off, Uranus was exactly on the midheaven, and of course Uranus has a connection with uranium. I'm not talking about nuclear explosions really, but I'm just mentioning it. So Uranus is exactly on the midheaven. Mars is exactly on the IC, so you can see that there's a Mars-Uranus opposition, and it's on the MC-IC axis. Now, you might say, oh, but it's not a very close opposition. It's 6 degrees apart. But then we ask ourselves, well, what is the midpoint between Mars and Uranus? Well, Uranus is at 20 Taurus. Mars is at 26 Taurus. So the midpoint is going to be around, 23 Aquarius? And there we have it. We see the moon exactly on the Mars-Uranus midpoint, and the moon is on Biden's 7th house cusp. Now, one shouldn't read too much into solar returns on their own, but this solar return is dramatic. I mean, it's one of the most dramatic solar returns I've seen. Biden's going to get it on November the 19th. And you have to remember also that Joe Biden is president of the United States. And so head of the state, it's possible he'll be dead by the time of his solar return. Who knows? Anything can happen. But if he's still president and he has this solar return, he is the head of state of the United States. So in a way, he represents the US. And so in a way, this is the American solar return. So if he's still president with that solar return, that's bad. Really bad. I hope the war with Ukraine, the Ukraine war, is finished by then. Because if it's not, it's serious. Anyway, I thought I'd just mention that. I will be talking about the solar return chart again. I quite want to do a video about America around July the 4th, which is it's nearly just in about a week's time. So in about a week, I'm going to be doing an America video, and I will certainly be coming back to this chart. Anyway, let's look at today's astrology. So today is June the 27th, 2023, and it is a Tuesday. So what's going on? I think it's a better day than yesterday, more dynamic. Reason being that the moon is in Libra, like it was yesterday, but it's moved on and it's now making a sextile aspect to Venus and Mars. So, Venus and Mars are a pair very much connected with relationships, particularly the sexual aspect of things. Venus is the universal ruler of women, Mars, universal ruler of men, moon sextile Venus, Mars. It's good for relationships. It's good for starting relationships. It's good for, getting one's sex appeal out into the open. It's good for being attractive. It's good for all that kind of stuff. Relationships aside, romantic relationships aside, moon sextile Venus, great time for meeting people, partnerships, whether it's business, pleasure, friendship, whatever. And also moon sextile Mars, it's pleasantly dynamic. It's a sextile, which is it's not as heavy going as a conjunction or a square or even as a trine. We can use our talent plus our assertion to get things done. And talking about relationships and love, I should also point out that the hypothetical planet Cupido, the planet of union and marriage, is aspecting the Venus-Mars midpoint. So that reinforces the idea that today could be very good for relationships. On the downside, the hypothetical planet Kronos, which is associated with government authority, is aspecting the Mars-Saturn and Saturn-Uranus midpoints. Governments can do some really bad things. That's a reminder there. Of course, at the worst, they can kill you. So be very careful when dealing with governments. Governments are bad news today. So if we're involved in any form of protest, if we're on the front line being shelled or shot at, whatever, it's bad news. And yeah, governments can do anything, and we really shouldn't trust the government, and we certainly shouldn't trust the government with our lives, with Kronos on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about today's astrology. I now want to, I'm going to accept for the fact I want to talk about your star sign forecast for today. So let's get going. Right, Aries. Things are starting to happen and relationships are becoming more satisfactory. You and someone else find common ground. Taurus. Today things are well organized and this allows existing plans to move to the next level. Discipline brings domestic happiness. Gemini. You understand what the world requires of you, and in the process you have the chance to make good financial decisions. But don't forget your fundamental creativity. Cancer. You manage things very well, and at work your proud competence gets you noticed, and your message hits home. Leo. It's not a day for keeping quiet. You have to communicate your talents and even go on short journeys. Romance has a verbal edge. Virgo. Financially, you are very competent, even if a lot of people don't notice. And there are some things that need to be kept secret. Libra. You're on the right wavelength, and your actions are likely to be successful. If you want to boost your love life, then you know what to do. Scorpio. The action is happening behind the scenes, but the results can be seen by the whole world. Your expertise is much in demand. Sagittarius. Excitement is a rare commodity, but you're the one to provide it. In your social life, you can show leadership. Capricorn. Your job is to harness other people's talents. So once you know what someone can do, you must be ready to provide them with the opportunity. Aquarius. A day for developing your ideas. They might seem strange, but soon enough you'll see the future taking shape. And Pisces. The key events are happening somewhere else, and the distance you've created for yourself provides extra safety. Now I will turn to the I Ching, and as always, I threw 3 coins, and I asked the question, what will Tuesday be like for people visiting my YouTube channel? So the first hexagram I got was obstruction. Now note, this is perhaps in conflict to what I was saying with the astrology. But what I'm doing is I'm making forecasts for today based on completely different principles. The astrology is something reasonably objective. The positions of the planets are there for all to see. the I Ching is subjective. It's me throwing coins in the air. So you can take it as you like, but you had the choice to visit this channel and actually get as far as you have in this video. So by making that choice, you perhaps got involved in this I Ching reading. So the first hexagram I got was obstruction. So what this means is that our first efforts to get anything done today may not be successful, and we may be tempted to withdraw. I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you hit an obstruction, why bother carrying on with it? I mean, it's just going to get nowhere. It's just going to get worse. But there is a moving line. This line here, second from the bottom, moves. And the I Ching tells us that when you've got this line moving, there is a sense of duty. It's like, even though there is an obstruction, we have a duty to try to deal with it. It's an obstruction that's not our fault. It just happens to be there. And so we maybe have the duty, an obligation to go out and deal with it. And the hexagram moves because of that changing line to the well. And the well is about resources that are always there, because when you think of a well, it's just always there. That's there, it's providing water. And so when we have this obstruction, we can use resources that we have within ourselves, that we have access to. We don't have to go out of our way to find resources to deal with the problem. We've actually got what it takes to solve the problem. We might not recognize this at the time, but we can solve the problem. And so we just have to be resourceful and use what's in front of us. And by doing that, we can solve the problem, and the day should end on a good note. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today, and I will talk to you tomorrow.